Happy holidays, friends, and welcome to another episode of the Refined Savage podcast. Let's do some business, and then we'll get to the show. Viking Coffee. It's the holiday season. Viking Coffee has everything you need. Check them out. Check out their Santa's Little Helper. It's one of my favorite blends they do. They only bring it out at the holidays. Awesome stuff. While you're there, get yourself some old man strength. Greatest stuff on earth. Viking Coffee 10 at checkout will get you 10% off at vikingcoffeeco.com. Cerberus has everything you need. It is a company run by strength athletes for strength athletes. They have everything you need. Wraps, straps, belts, t-shirts, smelling salts, everything. Tacky, everything you need. Give them a holler. Cerberus-strength.us. Use the code REFINEDSAVAGE10 at checkout for 10% off. Warrior CBD. So everybody's got their own CBD brands these days, and you see them in gas stations and grocery stores, and most of it is garbage. I've tried a lot of it. A lot of it is not good stuff. Warrior CBD is fantastic. I use the drops, the CBD drops, every night before bed. It just relaxes you, puts you, into a nice relaxing state, and you fall asleep fast. They have CBD oil for pets, which is phenomenal. If you want to get that, contact them directly through their website or send them an email or whatever. They have muscle rubs and pain sticks, all awesome stuff. I highly recommend it, and the owner, Nancy, is a fabulous human being. Warrior CBD. Check them out at warriorcbdofficial.com. Use the code WARRIOR20 off at checkout for 20% off. Serious Steel. Speaking of awesome people, the people at Serious Steel are the best. Another company run by strength athletes. Your boy Chad Clark works there. Great equipment, great customer service, and they have everything you could possibly want for your home gym, your commercial gym, your CrossFit box, whatever you need. Check them out, serioussteel.com. Use the code SAVAGE at checkout. Stay Classy Meats. If you want the best meat, the most healthy, just absolute best stuff on the planet, check out Stay Classy Meats. The beef, the bison, the bacon, out of this world. Just give them a holler. Check out their options on their website at stayclassymeats.com. Pick out a box you like. I get the 35-pound Elite box, but there are a bunch of different options there. If you need any help picking out, if you do like a build-your-own box and you need any help with what to get, give me a holler. Use the code SAVAGE at checkout. stayclassymeats.com. Use the code SAVAGE for 10% off. The Breath Belt, the best piece of lifting gear I have found in the last decade. It's just the best piece of equipment. It's great for strongman. If you're a strongman competitor or a thrower, anywhere where you need support, but you also need some mobility and flexibility, the Breath Belt will help you. We have people wearing it when they run, when they do body weight workouts. If you have back or psoas issues, hip problems, the Breath Belt can help. It's a great tool. There's unlimited uses for this thing, and people are finding new uses for it every day. Check them out at thebreathbelt.com. Use the code SAVAGE20, all caps, SAVAGE20 at checkout. Finally today, the online programming, Blind Dog online programming. That is done by yours truly. What we do is we release 6 workouts every week. The Power Program is for all you Highland Games shot putters out there, discus throwers, that kind of stuff. Anyone who wants to be an explosive athlete, check out the Power Program. If you are a young athlete or a new athlete to lifting, check out the Foundations Program. Hardstyle is all body weight for all you people who like the body weight stuff, or you are stuck at home with no equipment and your tyrannical governor has shut your gyms down. Showtime is our old school golden era style bodybuilding program. We have Gira, which is all kettlebells all the time. Awesome. I love that program. And finally, our Primal Program, which is the program we do at Blind Dog Gym. We also offer personalized programming to meet your goals. So if you are an athlete and need a little extra attention, give us a holler. We do that. We also do virtual throws programming. Anything you need for your strength, journey, drop us a line, blinddoggym@gmail.com, or shoot me a message through the Refined Savage Instagram page at The Refined Savage, and we'll help you out. Answer any of your questions. We won't try to push anything on you. So if you just have questions, don't worry about me trying to upsell you. Give us a holler. We'll take care of it. Today on the show, second time on the show, my brother, I love him to death, Quincy Perkins. If you listened to the last episode with Quincy when we were lounging at the Rum Bar on Duval Street, this is a little bit different. We did it via Zoom, obviously, because of all the Chinese virus going around, but we had a great time as usual, and he has such a great story, and the guy just has a million different stories to tell, and I just love talking to him, and he will be on the show every time I can get him on the show. So without further eloquence, here you go, Quincy Perkins. See you at the end. What's happening? What's happening in Key West? I'm missing it horribly.
Yeah, it's our first cold day here. You know what that means?
What does that mean?
70 degrees.
70.
It's 69 degrees outside right now.
The first night I ever landed in Key West, I was going down there in 2008 or 9 for a buddy's wedding, and we landed and they broke the record for lowest temperature in Key West ever.
Yeah.
And it was in the 30s, and we were in this bed and breakfast, and the lady who was running the bed and breakfast said, well, you can turn the heater on in the bathroom, the heat lamp, that might keep you warm. And we were just like, oh my God, I can't believe this. But
yeah, this is cold. Everybody outside has a sweater on right now. Running shirt right now. So.
Yeah, we got hit with a snowstorm last night, so it's we got about 8 inches of snow, and it's been brutal here.
I took this opportunity today to go for a long run because we just don't get this type of weather very often. So I was out the door and running early this morning, which is good, and set my PR in a 10K today.
That's awesome.
I attribute that only to the weather.
Well, this is all new to you, right? I mean, you really have been kicked. I saw a picture of you from I think you posted from like the Bumfardo documentary. I looked at it, I'm like, holy shit, has he lost a ton of weight from that?
Yeah. So I'm 6 foot exactly, and I was right at about 215 pounds.
Yeah.
Which was nothing, and no muscle, nothing. So I was in really bad shape. I was going at the time through just a lot of different kind of rough mental things. I was going through a divorce and just a lot of stuff was happening kind of all at once. It was one of those when it rains, it pours. And I was lucky enough that a couple years ago, 2 years ago, I was contacted by National Geographic, who I work for occasionally. They'll send me out on some different documentary work. And I went out with them to do a documentary about a guy named Michele Graglia. And Michele's got a really interesting story. He's Italian by birth, but grew up here in America. And he was a male model. He was one of the top 10 in the world. He did Gucci and Prada. You probably saw him at time like around the 2000s. He was really big. Valentino, Dolce Gabbana, I mean, you name it. He was the top of the top. And he was in New York City, and he was waiting for his girlfriend to go out to lunch. And there was a snowstorm, one of those ones that hits Manhattan once in a while, where it just shuts everything down immediately. And he jumped into a Barnes and Noble to wait, and she was about 15 minutes away. And he just looked at the front table there, and there was a book called Born to Run.
Oh, I love that book.
Yeah, and he picked it up, and he read this book. And as the story goes, he was going through, this sort of, I joke with him because it's a very cliched moment of, being a top male model and feeling like you don't have any purpose in life.
Right.
Like, oh, it must be so hard. Yeah. Give me a break. But he said that, he really felt empty and didn't really like what he was doing. He didn't really fit in there, and something just clicked in his head. So he started ultramarathon running.
Okay.
And he started out doing, 5K, 10Ks, and then he just thought that they were too small. So he started running really long distances, 100 miles, 200 miles, 400 miles, 500 miles. I mean, extraordinary lengths. And he decided 2 years ago to run across the 4 major deserts of the world. So the Atacama Desert in Chile, the Sahara Desert in Africa, the Gobi Desert in China, and then the Antarctic Desert, which is considered a desert, though it's covered with snow year round. So he wanted to run those and break the world record for all of them. He had just recently won the Badwater 135, which is in Death Valley, and just an extraordinarily crazy run in general to do. He set the world record for that. And I think that was 3 years ago. And then he just won the Moab 240 or 280, whatever that is.
Yeah.
In 60 hours or something like that. Extraordinary, running for 60 hours straight. I don't even know how that's possible.
No, I don't either.
But he contacted Nat Geo, and Nat Geo contacted me and said, well, how would you think about going down there and filming him? And I obviously said yes. What an extraordinary thing to do, but I was very concerned because I was the lead videographer on the job. And as opposed to a photographer that you can kind of sit there and shoot, a videographer or a filmmaker, you got to run, you got to move. And I was not in good shape. So I asked Nat Geo, as long as they paid for a trainer for me, and I only had 2 months to get up and running. Needless to say, I didn't even come close, but they put me on it was a high altitude because the Atacama Desert in Chile is also the highest and driest desert in the world. It's got the least amount of rainfall, and it also sits at 12,000 feet as a plateau. It's also an extraordinary place on Earth where the world's largest telescopes in the world are. And there's an extraordinary sort of magical thing that happens there where Chile allows scientists from around the world. And it's the only place kind of in the world where you'll see Americans, North Koreans, Russians, Chinese, Venezuelans, all in the same room studying the stars. They have these observatories there that are owned sort of as a co-op between all of these countries. And we were running past these, and it was just an extraordinary. We also ran past the place where NASA trained its Mars rover, because if you ever look at pictures of the Atacama Desert, it looks exactly like the landscape of Mars. But we took off and did that, and we trained for a month in the Atacama Desert, and then he went for the run. The previous record was 21 days in 8 hours. And so he gave himself 3 weeks to run across the Atacama Desert. He ended up doing it in 8 days and 16 hours.
Jeez.
He ran a total of 3 marathons a day for 8 days straight. He ran about 75 miles per day. He'd wake up at around 4 a.m. He'd run a marathon, excuse me, which would take about 5 hours or so. At 9 o'clock, he'd have breakfast and he'd sleep for 2 hours. Then around 11:30, 12, he would go again till 5. He'd break and sleep for 2 hours until 7. And then he'd go from 7 until midnight. And it was just an extraordinary, it was by far the most exhausting job I've ever had in my life. I mean, hour by hour, minute by minute, it was fully exhausting for every single person on that trip. We slept in the trucks, so there was never really good sleep. And you were just constantly moving and getting out of the truck and setting up, and you had to really kind of plan ahead. So I tell that story because doing that was to this day, it was like going to the moon with Neil Armstrong. I have no other way to describe it. I saw something, and I get choked up about this when I talk about it. I saw something in a human that I've never seen a human do before. I saw endurance that was past endurance. I saw a mental fortitude that was beyond even the closest like star of fortitude. I mean, it was beyond anything. I mean, I've never seen a human being do this. And because of that, it's stuck in my mind forever. I mean, to this day, I think about Michele every day. There's not a day that goes by that I don't think of him, because every day there's a struggle. And I think, well, at least I'm not running across the Atacama Desert. You know, he would run, it would be 101 degrees during the day, and then it would drop down to 32 at night. We would go through 5 layers of clothing throughout the day. So you would wake up, it was freezing till about 9 a.m. Then you'd shed your like parka. That would last till about 11. And then you would start dropping clothes from 11 to about 3. Then it was hot, sweating, dust all over you. You were baby wiping everything, your cameras. But it really stuck with me. And the reason I tell that story is because when I hit sort of this really low point, which I would say my lowest of the low was kind of October or November of last year, I was in really, really bad shape. You've known me for a little bit now.
When did I last see you? It was probably,
You saw me last summer, right? Something like that. August.
February, right before COVID broke down. That's what it was.
Oh, that's what
I met you the summer before. So I met you in August.
Yeah. So you saw me in August before, and I was kind of in the descent mode then.
Oh.
But hitting November was brutal. And then January hit, and I had a friend who was in China who said there's possibility that there's a pandemic getting out of control here, and it might come over. And that was kind of late January into February. And then the whole thing started to shut down, and it shut down fast, you know, I mean, if you remember. And it was kind of weird at that time because it was shut down so hard that I remember staying in my house and not going out of my house, wearing gloves to the grocery store. Do you remember those days?
Yeah, everyone was freaked out.
And it was within that I had a phone call with Michele, and he said, look, we were going to do the Gobi Desert, but it's put off for now. And we stayed on the phone call for about 2 hours, and I started to get into this talk with him about just kind of where I was mentally, and I broke down. I started crying, and he's a good friend, and even with friends, though, I don't really do that, but I don't know what it was. He just kind of got it out of me. Now, he works for a retreat in California where like super wealthy business CEOs go out there, they spend like 2 weeks, and he's the running coach. And so they do meditation, yoga, and he does runs with them, hikes, stuff like that. And so he's used to kind of seeing people in these states where they need help. And he just stayed on the phone with me, and he's, you know, it was about 2 hours, and he just talked me through things. And he said, you know, you should really pick up some sort of activity. Yeah. So I started working out, and I hated running at the time. I hated swimming. I hated biking. So I just liked lifting weights, and I suddenly went from 215 to 230 because I wasn't dropping weight. I was just gaining.
Getting swole.
Yeah. And I started, so I went for a run one day, and I couldn't even run a half a mile. And I couldn't even run that at a 10-minute pace. And it was just, and my legs hurt. And I thought, this is bad. Like I need to be a little bit better shape than this. And so I worked out strong for about 5 months, just hitting weights hard. And I got in really good shape, actually. And then I sort of decided, all right, I'm going to switch over to running and sort of try the triathlon thing.
Yeah.
And that's kind of what I've been on lately. But it's all really because of Michele. I think I wish everybody in the world would have the opportunity to see someone, and I know you've seen people like this.
Yeah.
Where the determination, where the mind switches over. Michele had a great thing where he was very kind all the time. He's an incredibly nice guy, incredibly calm, put together. But he said, whenever you're filming, if you come around me and I tell you that I'm in the cave, then don't bother me. That's what he said at first out when we got down to the Atacama to do training for the first month. And I was like, okay. And we trained the whole first month and nothing really, he never really said that. Well, then when we started on the run that first day, I was filming with him and I would kind of interview him during the run sometimes. And I said, how are you doing? And he looked at me like the, kind of gave me like this look. And he said, I'm in the cave. And I went, oh shit, this is it. And my heart started pounding. I was like, what does this mean? Is he gonna like bust out like the Hulk? And it was this. He has so he had scientists with him as well. We had 2 scientists that only tracked with us for 3 days, but they trained with him. They sort of hooked him up to electrodes and stuff like that, which he ended up ripping off at times. And but he has this innate ability. One, he's born with a very low lactic acid count. So there are people like this. He's just born naturally like that, and lucky him. And that's probably why he had this feeling that he could run long distances. But he had 3 things going for him. One was that he had low lactic acid count. 2 was that his body, I don't know if you ever saw this documentary about Michael Phelps, where he's actually born kind of genetically to be a swimmer.
I haven't seen that yet, but I want to watch it.
He's born with a long torso and short legs, which means that through the water, there's less drag, right? Bigger upper body for the swimming and lower drag on the legs. So his body's like built to be an Olympic swimmer. Michele's built the same way. His upper torso is tiny. He looks like a frail woman. And he'll joke about this too, so I'm not saying anything bad about it, but he looks like kind of a frail woman, and then his legs are just oaks. And
it's like a jockey on a horse,
Yeah, exactly. He's born that way. He's born to do it. But the third thing, and this is maybe the most incredible, is that he studied free divers, and some of the top free divers in the world. Ultra marathoning is really about breathing. It has nothing to do with your body, because they've basically found that a human being could technically run forever at about 10 miles per hour, as long as the nutrition, because that's about how fast we burn and we can put in and do fuel. I mean, a human can't run for that long, but technically it kind of could. So it's really all about just mind and your body breaking down, right? Achilles heels, blisters, knees, things like that, the weak points of the body. But he studied free divers and how they breathe. And the top free divers in the world are able to, they have learned to do this, control where oxygen goes in their body. Now, I don't know enough about this to like be an expert on this, but there's documentaries and books out there. There's a great movie called The Big Blue. If you haven't seen that, it's a great film about free divers and how it's a feature film, but it's based on true story. And it talks about how these free divers will dive in the icy waters, right, under the ice, and go way down. And they learn to keep their heartbeat, the just blood going to their body and not their brain. They sort of shut down their brain. And Michele studied this, and he trained to do this. I don't know how to do this or anything, but he would tell, and that was what in the cave meant. It meant that he was shutting down oxygen to his brain. And so not all of it, but it was really going to where he needed it, which was his legs. And it was a sort of meditative trance. And as we were talking in that 2-hour phone conversation, and I was sort of bawling and going through all this stuff, and he said, you've got to learn, oxygen is also like energy in our body, that we've got to learn to prioritize it. Where do we need it at these moments? What things in our life do we need to shut oxygen down from and put oxygen into? And that just sort of hit me like an epiphany.
Yeah. Yeah.
And the things I was going through, and COVID happening, and my divorce, and there was, the film industry shut down like that in a day. I had a big project going with Netflix that's starting back up soon, thank God, but sort of shut down immediately. And that I was kind of putting all my oxygen into that one project, and it was gone. So it just really hit me, and I started, it really was all about fitness, and it was the
Yeah.
perfect time to do so.
Yeah. It's interesting you mentioned that. I just finished the book Deep by James Nestor, which was all about free diving and
Yeah.
um, learning to free dive in order to get better interactions with sperm whales and dolphins when they would go and research them, and really interesting stuff. But yeah, when the whole COVID thing hit, it was amazing where you saw some people like yourself who kind of pivoted and put it all into some new endeavor that was going to push them further when this was done. And
Yeah.
then you had some people who just totally collapsed and have still collapsed and haven't recovered from it. It's really, it was a really, it's an ongoing, interesting look at human nature and how we deal with a stress that nobody can predict, I mean,
And if nothing else, I know that people fall all over the line with COVID and how serious it is. But one thing it did highlight was how drastically out of shape our country is.
yeah,
Whether, you know, uh, wherever you fall on it on the sort of political spectrum or whatever, one thing was for sure, and that was that it was a big wake up call for people's health. Uh,
for some people, they're just not stressed. I wish you would hear it more in the news that, hey, you need to get healthy, you need to get in shape, you need to stop. I mean, the lines at McDonald's are still so long, and I have had a handful of people come to me at the gym and say, "Hey, I need to get healthy. Let's do this." But it's been a handful of people. It's not like a mass.
quite a few people who have gotten sick now, including two that are good friends of mine that are in the hospital currently. None of the people that I know that have gotten seriously sick with it were in good shape.
Yeah,
Not one. I don't know a single person that was. I know people that got it and were in good shape and felt zero, were asymptomatic. But every single person that came down with more serious things, not one of them was in good shape, and far from it.
well, I think when I saw you in February, because we were on that stinking cruise ship,
Right.
and I don't ever get sick. Like, I mean, it's very, very rare. It'd been years since I didn't have a cold.
Yeah.
And the day after I saw you, we were heading back, and I started feeling kind of weird, and um, got a cough. It wasn't like, I felt like, holy cow, I'm getting sick. And then I had this cough that lasted like a month. But other than that, the only other thing that happened was I ran a fever one day. And I was like, why won't this cough go? And you hear old podcasts of mine, and I'm coughing on the podcast.
Yeah.
And I guess that boat we were on, the cruise line we were on, does this thing where you go out 5 days and then it comes back, the 5-dayers get off, and then they go right back out with half the boat and a new half.
Okay.
A 10-day. And when they finished their 10-day, that boat got quarantined. So it was on that ship.
Wow.
And you're seeing, Chinese folks with the masks on, and back then you're thinking, oh, what is this? And
I just don't understand. I really don't understand. This is like the perfect time to get in shape. I mean, it's almost like a signal from the universe to, hey, less working time, more time at home, less, activities out socializing. I mean, it's the perfect time to get a gym membership.
Right.
I mean, it was like a sign from the universe, like, get a gym membership. But yeah, I mean, it has changed my life completely. And, I've set goals for myself that are almost daily, 5K PRs, 10K PRs. And then I did the bike from Miami. Which,
So I wanted to talk about that. You went from US to Homestead, right?
Yeah. So I went Homestead down. The reason for that was because the wind was blowing that way. So I wanted a tailwind. But very few people have actually done it. A lot of people do 100 milers from Key Largo down to Key West, the Century rides. But very few people do the 130 from Homestead. And the reason for that is that the first 30 are kind of dangerous. First of all, the 18-mile stretch, there's no stopping points. And you got to start really early in the most dangerous part. So I thought Thanksgiving was coming up, and I thought, okay, you know, like maybe the day where the time on and other than maybe Christmas Day, where the least amount of people are on the road, would be at like 4 a.m. on Thanksgiving Day. Yeah. I was kind of wrong, actually. There was a lot of traffic. But not many people have done that 130 because a Century is kind of I mean, it's hard to do in a day. A Century, 100 miles is hard. But 130's, that extra 30 is killer, and it killed me. I'm also not a born cyclist either. I'm incredibly good shape, but it was incredibly difficult. The first 60 were pretty good, and then it just was so hard. And I think the thing is that I think I'm at a point now where I would need a coach, to tell you the truth, because I'm kind of hitting, like, I need to start knowing. I've done a little bit of work like on my VO2 max. I've started to sort of break down caloric intake and things like that, but I'm kind of at the point where, like, I need to go to like a sports, what's the name of those, like a sports scientist, sports doctor. Yeah.
Sports performance specialist or something like
that.
that.
Kind of do the testing and see my threshold and stuff like that, because those are numbers that I don't quite know yet, and that caught up to me at that point.
Are you one of these guys, like, I'm debating right now getting the Whoop band, because I need to know, okay, I slept 8 hours last night. I could do
No, I'm not like that at all. I do have an Apple Watch, which is so fucking annoying. It's like having a horrible girlfriend. It's like, time to stand up, time to breathe. You're just like, shut up.
Yeah.
And then, you know, and I've got my iPhone, and I use an app called Strava, which I really like because it's kind of half sports app and then half social media. And I kind of like that because it really presses you. You follow people who are better than you, and then they're like, oh, I ran an easy, you know, marathon today at a 5-minute mile, and you're like, God damn these people. But it pushes you to really do better, and I like that. Whereas Facebook just pushes you to be a worse person.
I've been off Facebook for almost 2 years now, and it's probably been a year and a half, and it's been so much better. I mean, and then with Instagram, I post something and then I usually just run away, you know?
I love Instagram though. I really, you know, Instagram is fun because it's, you know, it's so much less political. It's so much less opinionated in a sense. I mean, it's a hard call. I want to get off Facebook, but so much of the film industry is kind of related around it, and you know what I do, and staying in touch with people, you know how that works.
Oh yeah. You know, what's cool about social media is you can follow guys that give you that fuel, like, you know, David Goggins, or, you know, just guys that you can look to. And if you're feeling like a lazy piece of crap, you can go, oh God. All right, I can get up and get moving.
David Goggins came in second behind Michele at Moab, Moab 240 or something. But Michele just came out with a book too, and he would kill me right now. I can't remember the name of it. But he's just an extraordinary person. If you get a chance, you know, Google him. He does a TED Talk that's really extraordinary, and he tells that story about it being in Union Square in the snowstorm and seeing the book. You can also see the Atacama Run that I filmed for Nat Geo. That's on YouTube. But I think that there's something, I don't know what it is. I mean, you know what it is. It's sort of, once you break barriers, all the other stuff seems easy. I really relate it, and I know this sounds terrible, but I relate it to the first time I did LSD. which is that when I did LSD for the first time, it made every other drug look like Legos. You know, everything else looked like, what are you doing? And it really is the same sort of thing. I know that's a horrible analogy.
That's such I am so interested in that right now. And
have you done LSD before?
I haven't, you know, and I'm looking at mushrooms. I'm looking at LSD. You know, and then of course when I first started looking into this, I'm thinking, okay, I'm a big guy. You know, what if I have a bad trip and end up killing somebody? Which everyone tells you is not the way that really happens.
Right. No, especially on mushroom. Well, neither mushrooms nor LSD would really do that. Mushrooms is so, you know, it's been a long time since I've done them, but it's a very organic feeling.
Yeah.
You know, I would say the only thing not to do is be on like a second story, because you have a sensation that you can fly, or, you know, like height doesn't really make sense to you. You know, one of my suggestions, I don't even know if I told you this story or not, but I had the most extraordinary LSD. The second time I did it was so extraordinary that I'll never do it again, because I can't beat it. I was with a friend whose father started Dora the Explorer. He's a massively wealthy family. There were a couple other TV shows, like he worked on Sesame Street and a couple other major things, but he came up with Dora the Explorer. And needless to say, his son, who was a friend of mine, still is a friend of mine, has never worked a day in his life. But he owns an art gallery, and he specializes in large abstract paintings. These are like 40-foot by 40-foot paintings. I mean, that span. These are for like he specializes in like artwork for like the lobbies of IBM or Microsoft, you know, where they have an enormous wall and they need something there. So he has a gallery in Miami that's in this old warehouse, and it's sort of broken up. One side of it is the art gallery, and then the other side is his apartment. And he invited me up one day, and I got up there, and it was like 9 a.m, and he was like, "Hey, do you want to do some LSD?" And I was like, "Yeah, okay." And we tripped, and he was also a DJ. Of course he was, right? Like art gallery, wealthy kid, you know. This Jewish kid from Montreal had a big fro and wore like Prada slippers, you know, the idea. And so he starts putting on like Mozart, and I start walking through this gallery.
Oh yeah.
Like 40-foot paintings, and it's a concrete warehouse. So the Mozart is echoing off the walls in these extraordinary ways. And it's a boxed room, and he's got 2 paintings on each wall that are so there's 80-foot wide or 100-foot wide walls, 4 of them around me, with these 8 paintings. And it was just an extraordinary thing, and I can't go back from that. But you know, I loved it, and I would highly suggest that you're in like an art gallery. You could like rent out an art gallery. I'm serious. I would rent out like an abstract art gallery with like a good friend, maybe who's done it before and knows the sort of process. Put on some Mozart and kill it. And it's
so into.
That's Quincy's tips for LSD.
We'll put those in the show notes for you.
I'm getting in a lot of trouble for this interview.
I read Graham Hancock's book, Supernatural, where he talked about LSD, talked about mushrooms, and how early civilizations were using these, and with the cave paintings, and a lot of the artistic side of the brain could have been developed because these guys were experimenting with mushrooms and things like that. It was such an amazing book, and he talked about going to South America to do ayahuasca, and 10 people in his group, and they're all having similar visions and seeing similar entities in the visions. And it made me think that there's something we're not seeing around us at all times. There's some other dimension. There's other beings. There's a mirror we can't push our hand through, you know. There's something over there.
And that is no more apparent than when I've done ayahuasca as well, and it was extraordinary, completely different than LSD. LSD is a very chemical thing, but LSD, both are mind-blowingly exhausting. So be in good shape, because it's 8 hours of, it feels like you're running. It doesn't feel like you're running, but it's tiring.
You're going on a trip.
Yeah. And but LSD, I mean, once it hits, you know, people will talk about kind of the blinders coming off. It's as if, you know, it's as if our world, like, we're with horse blinders, and then you do LSD and it's like, wow, like the whole world envelops you suddenly. And it is such a, everything's connected. My breath is connected with the air that blows through the trees, that and there are these kind of vibrations, and people have different things, but my trip was definitely revolved around connectedness of the universe, molecules, vision, light, colors, sensory connections. But it's, I mean, it's an extraordinary thing. And I'm glad I did it as well on the sort of the fitness front, because there is a sense of putting your mind beyond, you know, we all hit, even when I run a fast 5K, you hit that barrier. And it's what takes you through that, when every single thing in your body is saying shut down. And how do you disconnect your body from saying shut down and your mind saying keep going? And I have to say LSD kind of helped. I mean, there are moments where I'm running and I'm thinking, okay, well, there's this sort of mental capacity beyond where I'm at right now that I can get to. I know I've been there before, so let me just sort of force myself in there. And I think that's what Michele was talking about in the cave. I'm still fascinated by that too. I should talk with him more about that, but that sense of, it's definitely a type of meditation. It's connecting from reality.
Since I revamped a lot of things during COVID with what we do with our people and what I do with myself, but what I have been noticing, or had been noticing, is we have these people in our gym who are in great shape. You know, they can run forever, they can do pull-ups forever, but they're so anxiety ridden, and they're so focused on, I got to get out of that gym as soon as possible, get my workout in, get out of there and get home to get my kids and do this and do that. And they're just running. So I had started meditating every day. And I don't miss it. I don't miss it all. I can't, it's part of my schedule. It's the first thing I do. And I started taking these people and forcing them. So I write it right on the board. We're going to do this workout today. And then you've got 10 minutes of meditation before you're allowed to leave this gym. And I got so much pushback at first. And now I think people actually start to look forward to it, because it's 10 minutes where I'm not letting you leave the gym. I've kidnapped you. You have to stay here, and you're going to get 10 minutes. So you might as well just turn your brain off and relax for the 10 minutes. And it's been great for people.
I think that's extraordinary. I really do. I mean, I could not recommend that more. The meditation for me, what I've tried to do, because I've been reading things about it in sort of different forms of meditation, mantra meditation, especially when it comes to sort of redundant activities, like bicycling, running, swimming, I find that my meditation is taking place during my workouts, which is a really interesting thing as well, because I just have time during that time to do that. But I think that I think it's as important as stretching, because what is it that makes you lift more, that makes you run more, that makes you, it's your mind. It's not your, you know, you could do another 30 push-ups. Is that going to make? Yeah, I mean, sure, but it's your mind. It's that real push. So that's why meditation is literally, you know, one of the most important things.
You listen to, first you have the stories of the grandma who lifts the car off their son because she's hit that zone. But then you look at guys who go through like Navy SEAL buds, and a lot of them will tell you, there was guys in my class who were Olympic level swimmers or water polo players, and they all quit. And here I'm this guy who, like, I have a friend who's been on the podcast who he went through buds. He was probably 6'2", 210, which is huge. He wasn't good at pull-ups. He was horrible at running. He'd never swam in the ocean before. He'd never shot a gun before. And he gets through buds and has a career with them. But he said the same thing. He'd look around and see these guys. It's like, how is this guy not going to make it? And they'd all quit, and it's just something in your brain that says, yeah, you can do 10 more push-ups or.
Yeah. Yeah. And it really is, it's a matter of comparison for me. I mean, my brain goes through so much when I'm running, especially the longer distances now. When I did my first Olympic marathon as well, a week ago. And, especially swimming, your just brain is going through so much, even more than running or bicycling. And, there's definitely comparisons that go on where I'm thinking, oh, well, Michele did this, so I should be able to swim another lap at least. But yeah, there's that mental fortitude. And I think that a lot of people, it comes from inspiration, right? That they have something to prove to themselves. It comes out of anger, right? The sort of F the world. There's comparisons of like, well, this guy can do this, so I can do another. Wherever that sort of mental fortitude grows out of, all those seeds, I don't think there's just one thing. I think there's 20, 50, 100. Michele talked about it when we were running across the Atacama Desert. For someone to run 3 marathons a day and break down, I mean, his legs were breaking down, his blisters, I mean, he was cutting open, bleeding, all that, that nasty stuff, wrapping, bandaging throughout the entire run. And plus it was dry with sand, and sand would get in your shoes. So it was like running across a beach at times. He would say, he goes through about 2,000 thoughts, sometimes in an hour, or 2,000 inspirational moments. He'll think about his father, his brother, his grandmother. He'll think about wherever that his anger, he's upset, he hates this person, he loves this person, a lost love. He'll think about a dog that he once had. He'll think about traveling. But wherever those sort of emotional seeds, whatever he can draw up, and these are for the moments that he's not sort of shutting down, and going into the cave. I think it's really about having a bank of those things.
Yeah, when I competed, I always, and I've told this story 100 times on the podcast, but, I was not a fun guy to be around. My family, I didn't do well by my family. I didn't do well by the other guys on the circuit. And a lot of that was because my drive came from, oh, you don't think I can do that? Fuck you, I can do that. So everybody became the enemy, and that's how I competed. It's how I was good. And then when I got out of that, I had to figure out a way to kind of revamp my brain, so I didn't have to have that in my life anymore, so.
Because it permeates the rest of your life too. Yeah. I mean, one of the things that Michele talked about was, he sort of got into these talks and he'd say, well, my running comes out of love. And I would go, oh God, here we go, peace and love. And, but for him, it rings true and great for him. And, I think for me, I'm still in these sort of FU kind of informational parts of it, but there is something to say for that, a sense of, it's a very Buddhist mentality, right? Of inspiration coming out of love, and a sort of peacefulness. And that's a lifelong job to get there. That's not something that,
it's weird because that, doing things out of love is kind of become this weird buzz phrase for people now. And
right. It's been co-opted for sure by not the right people.
Yeah. But doing this podcast, I used to hate people. I used to hate people in general because not that there's anything wrong where I live, other than the fact that I'm under 8 feet of snow right now, but you kind of get this, the election was a good indicator. You had these people who were so rabid Trump or rabid Biden, and and that becomes their focus of the 6 months that they were dealing with it, and they don't have a lot of stories to tell you. So you'll go and they'll sit at a bar on the weekends and talk about taking their kids to their soccer games, and it was just like, God, I can't deal with these people anymore. It's the same stories and the same situations. And then I started doing the podcast. I met people like you. I met, the Kibwe and Crystal Johnson. And
no, that was a great interview, by the way. One of my favorites. Yeah.
Well, so I love Kibwe and Crystal, and I tell them it all the time. I love you. These people who've come into my life who are just like these amazing human beings that you didn't even know they were out there until I started doing this. And it's been a fantastic journey for me to actually see, not everyone out there is a boring douchebag who is worried about politics,
Yeah. I'm just like you. I'm adverse to those type of conversations too. I definitely seek out adventurers in my life too. One of the great things about having been here in Key West is that they tend to congregate here. A lot of people, a lot of authentic sort of people on the run. And a lot of that happens to revolve around drug smuggling, unfortunately, down here. But there's a lot of writers that are drawn to that, a lot of really authentic artists, people who don't have to prove anything. There's a painter down here that I swear to God, I think he's the best painter in the world, Eric Anfinsen. And he's one of those people that he doesn't talk about art. He's so incredibly authentic, but he doesn't also talk about, taking kids to the soccer game or something like that. He's in a wheelchair. He was born with some spinal deformity. And he's got one of those wheelchairs where he presses and then can kind of stand up and paint, and then sit back down. But he's just the authenticity of it. People at the highest level, and that's something that I don't claim to have at all. But it's certainly something that I've been around a lot of these people, but people at the highest level of their game. And I've been lucky enough because I've been able to sort of be behind the camera interviewing these people. But some of the top scientists in the world, the top athletes in the world, people that you've interviewed, that you've spoken with, there's an authenticity that runs through it that is so addicting to me. To be around those people, the calmness that comes, the confidence of being so deep inside of it. And that's how I feel now in sort of filmmaking, but it's been a long time to get there. It's what was it, the 10,000 hours to master something. But I feel like I'm so deep within storytelling now that I can play, the rules come to me, I can play within forms of storytelling, of filmmaking, of genres. And there are people in other industries. And I would say that this goes way beyond the arts, even Navy SEALs that go so deep into, the endurance of pain and fortitude and specification of knowledge and teamwork, that they can play within the rules, that it's malleable to them. And that is really one of the most amazing things to me, which is why I'm drawn to your podcast, and why when you first asked me, I'm like, oh my God, I'm honored to be on it. Because you have an incredible lineup of people. And I don't know where that comes from, other than maybe just that authenticity, where that comes from, other than just a mastery of knowledge.
I just, it started off when I first started doing, I knew all these meatheads, and to be honest, I'm getting less and less meatheads on the show, a guy, the podcast that's coming out next week with a guy named Jim Wendler. And by the time yours will come out the week after, but Jim and I sat down, and Jim was a world record powerlifter, and he coaches a very successful high school football team and everything. We didn't talk about weightlifting at all. He's we talked about, the principles of liberty and what freedom really looks like, and, what people are kind of seeing in the U.S. today and how you're voting for whatever candidate or whatever political party is going to steal from you, put you in jail, is allowed to promote violence against you, And so we talked about that kind of stuff, but I'm really getting more and more into the conversations as opposed to, hey, tell me what you squatted the other day, which is the most boring thing you could possibly talk about.
Yeah, I think, and what's really extraordinary too is that industry. Let me just close this door real quick. One second.
You don't those 70-degree winds blowing through.
Man, the carpenters are out in full force today. They love this weather.
Yeah.
I think what's really interesting about the fitness industry too, and this, I'm just spitballing here, but something that I found from interviewing some of the athletes that I've worked with throughout my time, because I've worked for Adidas for a long time, so I've been able to be in touch with a lot of the athletes that they sponsor and stuff like that, is that naturally there comes a time where you have to transition because the body doesn't keep up with the mind, right? And so there's a point at which you transition, and almost all athletes go through this, what you might call a midlife crisis, but I really don't see it as that. It's something else where it's sort of a mental just transition into finding other things. You see this, I love listening to Mike Tyson nowadays, because you see the transition out of those, those times, even though he's gotten back into it recently, the sporting life, but there's a natural transition. It's really interesting because what athletes do is that they built up this entire world of like this mental endurance, and now they're taking it into these industries where it's not normally there. And there was a great interview, if I can find this, I'll send it to you. I think it was a TED Talk. This guy who was an endurance swimmer, and he swam, hundreds of miles, and he transitioned to become a coder for Google. He became a Google monkey, a coding monkey, as they call him. And he's talked about how he took that endurance formula of fitness, what some people might call sort of a meathead mentality, into coding, and how he sort of expanded on what all of these sort of nerds who had never transitioned in their life. And he became a much more robust Google coder because of that. And I find that fascinating, that there are these people, that really have to sort of recreate themselves, because nobody wants to do that. That's a scary thing.
When I remember the day it happened for me, and I retired on the pro circuit, came back, and a couple years later I was going to come back as a master and go to the world championships.
Sure.
Well, I had all that horsepower still, but my body was 2 or 3 years older and hadn't done much. And I was out throwing the hammer, and I let one go, and I felt a tear in my leg. And I'm laying on the ground, and I just said to myself, fuck this. I gotta find something else to do. And you switch, but all those lessons you learn through athletics transfer over. You just have to be a little bit artistic and a little bit knowledgeable on where to put them. And like I said, I had to kind of get out of that mindset that everyone is my enemy, but get up early, work hard, be creative, look for different angles. It's all the same. You're just putting it into a different, different set of rule or different set of circumstances.
I think one of the things that people are really drawn to your podcast, and you in general, I know I am, is that you embody this sense of that sort of, determination and guts to do something, but you're very open to learning. And what's great about this podcast and that sort of lifestyle is always being open and learning from these people, and sort of taking the best of the best. I learned from your podcasts and the things that you post, and you post books. Sometimes I'm like, I wonder what that's about, and I look it up, and the sense of learning, that is like the king of all. you
Well, I
know,
appreciate that. Thank you.
yeah, I mean, because then life never gets old, really, and that's
Yeah, it's we're taking up jujitsu was scary as hell. We're taking up archery now, and it's just it's fun to learn this stuff from people, and now that I'm not 300 pounds, I can actually do things. My wife has to go for a walk, I can do that. It's been good.
interesting. I'm at this point now, so I'm going to continue sort of this marathon trek thing. I'm going to in February, I'm doing a half Ironman, and then at that point, I'm going to sort of see where I feel like going from there.
Where's that going to be at?
That's up in Fort Lauderdale.
Okay.
It's a 70.3, and it's an actual Ironman accredited event, and it's a qualifier for the longer Ironmans. But we'll see. I'm going to sort of take it at that point and see where I feel. But it's interesting to sort of, be on this trek of pushing these boundaries every day and setting new goals every day. And I think that I'm really happy right now mentally, and that is the key. The fitness, I'm like, oh yeah, I am getting in fitness shape, but it's really I've gotten in so much mental shape.
Yeah.
That the little six pack in my brain is firing on all cylinders right now, and that's what makes this all worth it.
I tell people that all the time. I'm not bullshitting. You don't come to my gym, whatever. But I'm a firm believer that if you discipline yourself to fix your diet, to swing a kettlebell, to go for a run, it'll solve so many of these problems we're having, not just health, not just physical health, but mental health. We have too many people. And look, I understand antidepressants are some people really need them, but I think that if you go to your doctor and the first question he isn't asking you is, are you exercising? How's your diet? What's your stress level like? And then they're just prescribing you these medications that's a problem. So when I get people in the gym, that's kind of I kind of take them aside and say, hey, let's talk about your health before we talk about your six pack. What can we get you off of? Are you on heavy, blood pressure medications? Can we get you to a point where your doctor takes you off those? But I think you're right. You're absolutely right that mental part of it is really the most important thing. Can you find something to push yourself and make yourself happy through that?
Yeah, it's been interesting too. I had this conversation with Michele. We talk about world records and, distances and things like that. And Michele always said to me, I wonder what man went the furthest in his mind.
Yeah.
That always kind of stuck with me. Who was the guy that went the furthest and survived the hardest? Was there some guy during the pirate era on a boat that, was taking his last breaths and fought through it? Is there, who went the furthest distance? And that's a question that, may never be answered. It certainly feels like I'm the one doing it when I'm hitting my 10K PR.
Yeah.
But I think, who's the man that went to the moon first in his mind? I think that's a really interesting question. And I think there are going to be people that, we're going to see humans, pushing further, the guy that runs around the world the fastest time or whatever it is. It's weird that, we have Diana Nyad here in Key West too. She lives.
Oh yeah. I forgot about her.
Yeah. She's someone that you should, I'll get her to be on your podcast. She's a good friend of mine.
I love that.
And she tried swimming from Cuba to Key West, 110 miles. She failed 4 times, and the 5th time was successful. First time with a person without a shark cage, because there's sharks all over. She got bitten by jellyfish so bad that she couldn't take off her mask because her mask was on her face and the swelling went over the lips of the mask. So she couldn't take her mask off. She had to wait till it went down, hours after her swim to take her mask off. I could be exaggerating there. I don't know. But I know that there were a lot of, her face got bitten up, and that's why she actually quit 2 of the 5 times, was because of jellyfish. But there's an endurance there that just is mind blowing. And swimming,
oh, it's the worst.
Is the worst. And swimming in a pool, I love. Swimming in the ocean where I wouldn't be able to see below me, because I also suffer from thalassophobia or whatever it is, the fear of the dark, deep water.
Yeah.
Like when I'm out on a boat and I can't see the bottom, I'm immediately afraid.
Well, you should definitely live on an island in the middle of the Caribbean then.
Some crazy kraken octopus that's going to come up and swallow me, or a shark like that Jaws poster just coming up and swallowing me whole. That definitely runs through my mind. But I'm fascinated by that endurance mentality for sure.
Yeah, I mean, swimming is the worst. I mean, if I'm in a pool, at least I can grab the side as I get tired. I mean,
yeah.
And you're right. The Keys are the sharkiest place I've ever been in my life. I've never seen so many sharks in my life. Just being there, not looking for them.
Right. It's really the ones that are in the Gulf, the black tips and the bull sharks. Bull sharks are the only sharks that attack out of fun and not for hunger, or threat or whatever it is. So, yeah, I mean, she had a person on a kayak with something called a shark shield, and you'll have to get her on. It's a fascinating story. I think she's written a couple books. She was on Oprah and she gave TED Talks and stuff like that about it. But getting her one-on-one would be cool.
Yeah, it'd be amazing.
Yeah. And we'll have to reach back out to Sebastian at some point.
Yeah, like I said, I contacted him right before COVID. I was only doing these in-person podcasts. So, it's weird enough to have some weirdo come and meet you for coffee and do a podcast. Maybe now, and especially during COVID. So now maybe that we're doing with the Zoom. I had to go to Zoom because I had so many people I wanted to talk to, and they just, they're just not around here. I couldn't take the time to go hang. One of the best times was coming down to meet you and David and hang out. I said, fuck it, I'm just going down to Key West for 3 days and
get a rum right after this, actually.
You're going to the rum? Where are you going?
You're gonna get a rum right after this, since I did during the interview, right?
Yeah, that was a little bit better setup we had that first interview, for sure. Yeah,
that was great.
So what's going on with Reef?
So Reef's, he's working on another book right now. He's sort of involved with this Netflix thing. I can tell you kind of briefly about it. But I can't say much about it right now. I'm under a non-disclosure, but
Reef's involved with the Netflix special. Holy shit.
Involved with it in so much as the story that I'm working on a 3-part documentary series right now about Bumfardo, who is the famous missing drug smuggler, the Jimmy Hoffa of South Florida. And he was sort of on the run for 43 years with the FBI hot on his heels. And we went to Netflix with the idea that I wanted to tell this story. And when we originally pitched it, the original pitch was that it was the son of a drug smuggler looking for one of the most infamous missing drug smugglers ever.
Yeah.
I had this history, and now I'm on the lookout or trying to find the most infamous of them all down here. And they kind of passed on that idea and wanted to make it sort of more of a third-person objective story. This is who Bumfardo was, that I wasn't really involved in it. This is who may have killed him. This is where he may have hidden out, may have gone. And it was really a fight. And that happened during COVID to get Netflix back on board with, look, this has got to be, it's going to be a much better story if it's about me trying to find him and all the things I went through. Like me, traveling down to Costa Rica through the jungles, finding these people, talking with them. It was really the story of me coming to terms with what Key West is all about. What is this island that became this home for all these drug smugglers, and all of them went missing. And here's the most important of them all. And whatever happened to them, nobody knew. And I was the only person in the world that got these FBI files and the DEA files and figured it out. And so it had to be my story. And so because of that, Netflix, sort of were dragging their feet until another producer came on and he said, no, that's the story that has to be told. And
that's got to be the way it's.
Yeah. And
it's
so
much more intriguing that way.
Yeah. And so my dad's been sort of roped back in because of that. And hopefully we'll be making appearances and stuff like that. We'll see.
That's amazing.
But yeah, it's a long road to go. It's a long way off. And we're actually still technically kind of in the early steps of this, even though for me, it's been a 6-year project. We're kind of baby stepping through, and that's really just because of COVID and shooting and being able to get down to Costa Rica or filming in Tampa. A lot of this was based off interviews and making sure people feel secure. Yeah. In a room with, because there's usually a crew of 6 or 7 people, but the film industry's really done a good job of figuring it out. I mean, it's been a do or die, so they've had to figure out what are the protocols we got to go by so that we don't shut down every 2 weeks because someone on set got sick. So there's really some good protocols in place right now, and we're now moving slowly into that. But as soon as I know more, you're going to be one of the first people I tell. So I'll save some of my breaking news for you.
Yeah, we have to do a podcast one of these days with you and Reeve.
Yeah. Oh God. It's one of those things when he's your dad, it's a little bit different. No,
we're talking like everybody knows who he is. So
yeah, I'm gonna have one of those writers, right? That like he'll a set of subjects that he can talk about. Anything pre 18 years old with me is off limits.
Yeah, you don't want anything weird coming out. Give people like a brief bio on your dad.
Oh God, he's an anomaly. He's really he's a quintessential adventurer. He was a rogue teenager in the sort of forests of northern Michigan who became the #1 ranked diver in the Army in 1969 through 71. Bronze Star. Came out of Vietnam, went into experimental diving with the Navy, was one of the first people to experiment with like drugs and commercial diving outfits, at 300 feet under the water in the Bahamas, then transitioned into one of the largest drug smugglers in South Florida. He was part of a crew called the Gentlemen Smugglers. There's a couple of great books on this. My favorite of them, don't tell my dad, of course, his book's my favorite, but
sure.
Great book called
book.
Yeah, there's a great book called Jackpot, which sort of outlines what these guys did. And he then went to jail, then transitioned from that into the last person to ever get a marine wrecking license in the United States, in the state of Florida, which meant that he was a marine salvager. He was an EMT. He saved lives, many lives of people lost out at sea, dehydrated, hitting the reef. He salvaged boats. He's got extraordinary stories of, gunfights between smugglers when he was sort of on the other side, and the Coast Guard and Navy. He owned an antique shop. But he's always been an adventurer. And he's just done extraordinary things, sailing around Cuba and to the Bahamas and some kind of endurance things as well. But he's just an extraordinary man. He really is. Drives me fucking crazy.
I bet he does. Yeah. Guys like him were, I think, what made me fall in love with Key West to begin with. I mean, I've been to, Grand Turk and St. Thomas and all these places that are beautiful and tropical, but it's this weird conglomeration of artists and smugglers and criminals and cowboys and just hanging out, walking around Key West. And people don't get it. It's the same people. I'm a big Jimmy Buffett fan. It's the same people who go to Jimmy Buffett to get drunk and listen to Margaritaville for the 8 millionth time, but they don't know any of the songs from before that are really the storyteller songs, and it's going to the chart room.
Yeah.
And, when John Holscher was there and him telling you stories about all the crazy people and crazy things that have gone on that island. It's just, there's so much history, and it's crazy history.
Yeah, I mean, you really start to see one of my favorite, authors and maybe personas, people ever, is Hunter S. Thompson.
Oh yeah.
And you can really see why he was drawn here in the 70s and 80s, 60s and 70s and 80s, was because there was a thing here, and it's still here occasionally. There are still people here, even though people have said Key West has died. There's still few. In fact, there's a photographer who lives in Tennessee who's in town currently, Lawson Little, who I'm going to be interviewing the next couple of days. And he is one of those guys, he was a photographer for Vogue. He kind of started out in fashion. And then Dolly Parton called him up and said, hey, I've got a concert. Would you come shoot it? And then before he knew it, he was filming photographing the top country music stars in the world, and that was his thing. He was a country music photographer, and if you were a country music star, you wanted to get shot by Lawson Little. And he lived here in Key West full time, so he'd fly out, to Nashville and Austin and things like that, and he still does it. But then he sort of switched he went from that country music into photographing Shel Silverstein, Hunter S. Thompson, Bill Murray, some of these kind of like, wild and wacky guys. He got into Hollywood photography. But he now lives in Tennessee, but that's only as of 10 years ago. He lived basically his whole career here in Key West. And he's still around. And those type of people that I'm just drawn to. He's got some extraordinary stories.
There was a guy, his name was Steve Everett.
Mm.
He was the center for the Cleveland Browns. And I remember he moved down to the island. I don't know if he's still down there or not, but he had his own art gallery down there. This giant of a man painting pictures down in Key West.
Yeah, I mean, it's like they say, it's the end of the road for a lot of people. And it's still true. It still happens down here. And that's why you got to come back as soon as all this stuff.
Man, this is probably the longest time I haven't been down there. I mean, it's been a long time. It's been since February.
West is actually pretty safe for COVID. Altogether,
well, thanks to you, it's pretty safe. You were a big part of that.
Yeah, I mean, it was just early on getting a lot of stuff, done quickly early on, that I think helped setting the rules for what would happen later on. Key West is a tiny island, so we live by packing a lot of people into a very tiny space.
Yep.
Is the exact opposite of that's where COVID lives. And so it's figuring out how to reimagine that and still live our lives down here. And I think we've done a good job of that. Our numbers are, going up like everywhere else right now. Our ex-mayor, Craig Cates, is struggling through it right now. He's in the hospital. His wife and daughter caught it. And I guess his wife and daughter are an even worse than he is. They're in serious ICU up in Miami. They had to be airlifted out. But altogether, I feel like we're doing pretty well, and it's a pretty safe environment down here with the sun, the wind. People are, wearing masks and spacing out a little bit. But that's how we made our living, and so it's tough to, convince people to come down here. But I would say this: I think if we were in like the northern part of the United States, we would have higher cases. I think a lot of it has to do with people are in a lot better shape down here. It's very rare to see obese people in Key West. In the sunshine, I don't know what the sun has to do with COVID, but I think it helps. And certainly the air, the ocean breeze and the salt, heaviness of the air, I think keeps the moisture down. I think it sets it down. These could be all conspiracy theories,
Well,
but
uh,
I think that's what helps, because you see our numbers are lower than most places.
vitamin D is huge. You know,
Yeah.
they talked about that. I've been taking vitamin D for years, but which is probably why I don't get sick very often. But I think with all the sun and people out in it and being outside doesn't seem to spread very well outdoors, and everyone's always outdoors there. And, you know, it's
And we
right.
tend to have a smaller retirement community here, like retirement community. So we don't have, it's not doesn't skew too much older. Um, and then there's a lot of stuff in Key West to enjoy, without anybody else also,
Yeah.
get out on the boat and the beach and walk around Old Town and stuff like that. So we'll see what happens. I still think that we're going to be in it for a while. And I don't know what the cruise ships, what's going to happen. We voted on that down here.
I remember you were pushing it real hard.
Yeah, so we did finally win. We won there were 4 referendums down here to limit the size of cruise ships. This really came out of not so much COVID, just became an excuse, but what we really started to see was an environmental impact down here that just couldn't be ignored.
Yeah.
I'm one of those people that I'm like you, I think I'm very kind of pragmatic. Like, when it comes to COVID, it's like, just fucking use common sense. We don't need to shut down every single thing. It was the same with cruise ships. We don't need to shut down cruise ships, but there were things that you could not ignore. And those became my fisherman friends who just, the die off of tarpon was extraordinary. And that was just a matter of silt. And once that silt died off and those tarpon, started coming back, the numbers just didn't lie about it, and you could not ignore it. On top of that, you started to see the infrastructure. There was a question for a long time of how many people is too many people to fit on an island.
Yeah.
And that became a real technical question. Could you fit 1 million people on this island? And would we be able to sustain that for 24 hours? Seriously,
Sure. Yeah.
Would there be enough bathrooms, water, electricity, whatever, meaning would the infrastructure take care of it? And what is that number? And we start to see that with the influx of a certain number of people, 3,500 people coming into the docks, and because of the way that the tourism industry works down there, it kept getting crunched into smaller and smaller blocks over the years.
Yeah.
If you looked at 10 years ago, the average, and we could pinpoint this, I mean, you saw tourists walking all the way down to the southernmost point, and almost all of the cruise ship people, right? And you went by the Hemingway house, and those numbers have dwindled and dwindled and dwindled to where you can buy Hemingway shirts the minute you get off the cruise ship. And that was done by a very small amount of people who are not putting money back into the community. And when CVS opened up down on that block on the end, and Walgreens and Haagen-Dazs and Ripley, and it just started, all these conglomerates started focus on that area naturally. And as soon as the land became available, people were buying in, these corporates that had the money. People they started to sell fake grape shots at CVS to try to get people not to go to the bars. And that was kind of when it was like, all right, it's not working now for the rest of us. And that's when we went to this referendum and we said, we want smaller cruise ships with better clientele, that are here longer, meaning not shuffling off for 4 hours and back on. And the reason for that was just, we got to make this town survive. Otherwise, you're going to start seeing McDonald's, you step off right into McDonald's ball pit, out of the cruise ship, and we can't handle that. So
one of the things that shocked me when I went down there was a Wendy's right on Duval Street.
Yeah,
actual people in it.
There's now 3 Starbucks, and it's getting worse. There's now an opening down on, Mallory Square area where they're going to be opening up a vape shop, one of these but it's like a conglomerate one. And so, they're trying to get the guys right off the boat.
Yeah.
And I understand that because, those people, not to sound ignorant or anything, but you see the weight, the individual weight of each of these people, going up. They're not walking as far. And it's just, they're not getting to the other blocks of Duval Street, and there's no incentive. They've got everything in that first block that they need. Hemingway t-shirt, a Southernmost keychain,
You touched all the bases,
Yeah.
It's the absolute worst way. And I've, like I said, I've been down there so many times, but it's the absolute worst way to see Key West is off the cruise ship,
Yeah. But I mean, the good thing about a cruise ship is that there's a lot of good stuff to it. So we didn't want to shut them down because there's a lot of people that come, they see Key West for the first time, and then they fly back down and, rent a house or something like that, like you've done. What I'm really proud of is the fact that it's a small town fighting Goliath, because fighting the cruise ship industry is impossible. And it was really 5 of us. It was 5 local guys that got together, and we were like, let's fight this. And we all really took different parts of the fight. I was kind of early on because I was fearless in the social media fight to just speak out, say, look, these are the facts, these are the numbers, this is what's happening. And I got a lot of flack for that, but it was all from people who, they don't have any vested interest in this town. So I didn't really care what they said. And so once I did that, it then took into like Evan Haskell and Arlo, who are more in sort of the political side. They could get things done with some of the city commissioners. Then we had a lawyer kind of join the force, and then it just sort of took off. And it was really the 5 of us that were able to congeal these referendums into very specific, legalese that could be put on the ballot. And we won overwhelmingly, 65%, which is unheard of for a referendum.
Sure.
And so 65% of Key West, or 65% voted for. There was like 20% that abstained, and 20% that voted anti. So, I mean, it was an overwhelming, kick-ass thing that we did.
And so important.
And if nothing else, the one thing it does do is that it will hold cruise ships. The logo became smaller, cleaner, safer, right? We wanted smaller, cleaner, safer ships. The smaller, we weren't sure we were going to get. We did get that in the referendum. We don't know if we'll get that in the end because that's got to go through all sorts of state and federal and eco, agencies up in DC and stuff like that. But the one thing we were sure of is that we got cleaner. That's something that these cruise ships will no longer be able to dump within 1 mile because they were dumping. We now have like a fund that's being created for both the Coast Guard and Navy to focus on that, as well as JIATF, which is a joint interagency task force. So that's really incredible that we're now using military might to fight against these people dumping on our fucking reefs out here, So
it's so important. Yeah, I mean, it's a tourist town. I live in a tourist town, believe it or not. I don't know why you would come to this town, but it's so important to preserve what makes it special to begin with. Look, I'm not embarrassed to admit that every time I leave Key West, I cry. Every single time. My wife will tell you, I love it so much. I've been down there so often, and it feels like another home to me, and it's such a special place for me. And I was so psyched to see you fighting that battle when you were doing it.
Yeah. It was really a David versus Goliath, and it was really something to say for the community, that we could stand up for ourselves and not just be taken apart by a very small group of people with vested interests. So very happy about that.
That's awesome. Well, I'm going to wrap this up, and we need to do this more often.
I'm here, man, anytime. I enjoy talking with you every single time I'm
on.
It's
fun, right? We have a good time.
Great, yeah, and keep doing it, man, because I listen to these podcasts, put them on. They're part of my running workout, and
that's great.
So thank you so much. And as soon as this whole thing lifts, your first drink's on me.
I appreciate that. It'll be a big one. I'll be coming in hot, that's for sure.
Sounds great.
All right, Quincy, great talking to you, and we'll do this again soon.
Thanks so much, Mark. All right, I'll talk to you soon.
All right, bye-bye.
Take care.